I can take this for anywhere from 90 to 120 minutes. It's up to you guys what you'd like to do. So I'll just keep talking until you tell me you're tired.
Okay, so Steve, let me start off the day. Hello to all. Welcome back to our sixth episode of the photography for newbies and geeks. Welcome back after Thanksgiving. We have today Stephen Labkoff, who will take us through Lightroom to enhance whatever you've captured. And Stephen is a physician and a friend of Sandeep Shah. So Sandeep volunteered Steve's time, and Steve, of course, graciously accepted. And Stephen is here. If you go to his website, lumisant.com, it is fantastic. So you can see the Milky Way behind him, and there are many others on his site. So welcome, Steve, and thanks for agreeing to teach us Lightroom. All yours, take over.
Okay, very good. Thanks, everybody, and very nice to meet you all. I did drop my website in the chat box, and if you want to drop questions in the chat box as we go through this, that'd be great. I would like this to be interactive.
Let me take a moment to add to that introduction, if I may. So Steve and I go back at least 27, 28 years, I think. So if he has been put up to do this, his regret goes back 27 years ago, I guess. And if this group is, full of geeks, as we all know, as IITians known for, Steve is actually geekest of them all, being a physician. So I don't think I've seen anybody as passionate about toys and gadgets. I would call it gadgets, technology gadgets. So he's the one who taught me how to do video editing long back. And he just sort of, with all kinds of stuff, he just collects this new toys, new apps, new drones and whatnot. And so it's been an amazing friend, of course, and very talented one. So take over, Steve.
Okay, thanks, Sandeep. And yeah, we do go back a very long way. In fact, I remember holding his daughter. We walked up a mountain in near Sandeep's home in Massachusetts called Mount Wachusett, and I carried his youngest daughter up the top of the mountain on my shoulders, like literally had her on my shoulders when she was about 3 or 4. And now she's a physician, chief resident at Dartmouth Medical Center. No, in New York now, right? She's down in New York.
No, she's in New Haven. Yeah, she's doing cardiology.
Cardiology at Yale. So I carried her literally on my shoulders for a hike up a mountain. I don't think I could pull that off anymore. And his daughter has the distinction of having the longest hair of any woman I've ever met. I don't know if she still has it that long, but last time I saw her, it was like down to her ankles or something. Let me share my screen. Here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through some Lightroom, and I literally, as we were getting started here, discovered a bug, and the bug's going to prevent me from showing one thing in Lightroom, but I'll hopefully get through it without that tripping me up. And I just searched on Google and found a way to fix it, but I don't have the time in the middle of this talk to fix the bug. I'm going to take you through. Come on, wake up. Of course, now PowerPoint decides to act up. There we go, objectives. So when you're done with this seminar, I hope that I can give you, I'm going to give you an overview of sort of like the philosophy of Lightroom, because Lightroom is both a way of working as well as a tool. And you need to understand the way it works in order to really take advantage of the tool. And I took a class from Adobe some years ago and read a book on it. And if you get what the thinking behind it, it makes using the tool a whole lot easier. And I'll take you through some of the tools. And then in the second half of the talk, I'll take you through some photos that I've done, and we'll talk about sort of before and afters and how you go from before to after. And that'll be with both Lightroom and a little bit of Photoshop. And we'll talk about tools. And then the outline that was asked of me was to take you through some of sort of a show of some of my photographs. And I'll take you through a show of some of that. So the first, I don't know why PowerPoint's going so slowly. I'm trying to flip between slides and it's giving me the ball of death. I can't Let me try to go to full presentation. Maybe that'll help. Of course, we did test all this before we got online, so. And I quit all non-essential
One of the
applications.
problems sometimes when the screen sharing is on, generally the computer starts scrolling, especially if you have multiple things going. So
Yeah, I see that. So
Lightroom.
what am I sharing, guys? Tell me if I'm sharing the.
Yeah, it's actually showing you the whole dashboard. So that's also another problem with this.
Okay, I switched it off. Is it showing it correctly
Yeah,
now?
now it's fine. Yeah. This is fine. Yeah.
Okay, let's hopefully it's going to crawl. I don't know what the problem is. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop PowerPoint and I'm going to restart PowerPoint. And for that, I apologize.
No problem. Welcome, Steve. We understand.
End show. And literally, we did test all this a few minutes back.
That's quite all right. We are used to Bill Gates rebooting the computer, so.
Well, I don't want to have to reboot and come back in and waste 5 minutes of time here. Let's try it again here. Let's restart PowerPoint. Yeah, I think the screen share doesn't seem to want to, it doesn't like the screen sharing because now I'm flipping through the slides fine. All right, let me try screen sharing again. Boy, it's doing the same thing. All right, we'll have to just deal with it, I suppose. There's this lag, and I think it might be related to the screen sharing. So the philosophy of Lightroom. So Lightroom, when you think about it, like if you get Photoshop, it comes with Adobe Bridge, and Adobe Bridge is a file organization platform that lets you sort of look through your hard drive. But Bridge doesn't do something that Lightroom does. So think of Lightroom as a very sophisticated visual database that lies on top of your photography. And it literally manages all of what you're doing with your photographs. So you have to, when you're using Lightroom, kind of relinquish your own obsessive compulsive need to control all the file structures and everything and let Lightroom take over. That was actually a hard thing for me to do personally because I was so used to like meticulously ordering my hard drive and keeping things, where they ought to be from my perspective. But Lightroom takes a philosophy, and so does iPhoto for that matter, and some of the other photography management applications. It creates the concept of a catalog, and inside the catalog are basically database pointers to the files in the hard drive, and the catalog then manages the locations of all the images that you have. And then what it does is it's a non-destructive batch editing tool. So it actually allows you to maintain all of the photography, all the pictures in your catalog. And when you make adjustments, it sort of stores them as a recipe. And the recipe gives you the ability to go back later in time and actually you can create virtual copies of your images, which will let you take different pathways of editing and store them all for non-destructive editing for the life of the photo in the catalog. Now that is materially different than what Photoshop does. Photoshop actually, depending on how much hard drive space you have, if you don't care about hard drive space, you can do non-destructive editing as well. But for the most part, you change pixels in Photoshop. You literally physically change them. And, image 1 versus image 2 in Photoshop, you've mechanically altered the bits and bytes in the image generally. Lightroom, not so much. Lightroom keeps it all pristine. Your original photographs stay pristine. The other thing that it does is it gives you the opportunity to add metadata to your catalog, and that lets you really get a lot of power over your photographs so you can use them for secondary purposes. And I was talking to Sandeep earlier on this call before we were live, and I figured, for a holiday present for my wife, we went on a trip to South Africa a couple of years ago, and I just never got around to making a photo book. And I'm going to be making one for her, and I have to cull 15,000 images down to about, 200. And if it wasn't for Lightroom, I physically couldn't accomplish that. So we'll talk about how all those things work. Let's see if this will go next. I'm trying to go to the next slide, and it's the beach ball of death. Okay, so what you need to think about is another thing is that because it's a database and it overlays everything, you actually don't need to have all your photos sitting on in one place, and they don't have to be on your main system drive. You can have a daisy chain of 5 or 6 hard drives and spread your catalog across multiple hard drives. The catalog file itself is one file, or actually a series of files, which contain pointers and previews, but the pictures themselves can reside anywhere you so desire. Lightroom keeps track of all that. And it also keeps track of all the information. So it keeps your folders organized. It organizes them typically by date, although you can change that if you'd like. You don't have to do it their way. It is easier from my perspective to keep it in date-oriented file structure if you want. And then there's a master concept of the catalog itself. And depending on your workflow and how you do your photography, you can create a separate catalog for different jobs. So if you're a professional photographer and you're shooting weddings or bar mitzvahs, or I'm not sure what the Indian equivalent of a bar mitzvah is, but you can create a separate catalog and just have all the photos from that one event in the catalog, or you can have them all inside of one massive catalog. I have taken in my world, I have one massive catalog. I don't tend to use multiple catalogs because I don't like flipping from catalog to catalog. And I do like to be able to see everything in a top line view. The problem is that those catalog files get to be gigantic. And right now my catalog is over 4 gigabytes, which exceeds some limit that the Apple file structure handles. So then when I go to back it up, I have to save it with a gzip or something. We're trying to flip slides. I should flip it 10 seconds before I want to move. Okay, so there's a suffix if you look for it called, sorry?
Stephen, would you like us to ask you questions in between, or
Sure.
we
can stop and I can take questions. Just, we don't want to go too many, but I can answer one or two.
Sure. So when you talk about the catalog size going beyond what Apple can, let's say, handle, is it possible to do catalogs annually, change the name of the catalog?
Yeah, absolutely. So I changed my last catalog change. My first catalog change was from everything up to 2013. And then it got too big. And then I made a new catalog from 2013 forward, which is where I am now. It's 7 years worth and it's gigantic. And I'm going to have to switch again, I think in January, and start a new catalog because it's just too much. The performance doesn't really get horrible, but the performance does start to lag, and start various tasks, especially rendering previews, can start to lag if it gets too large. So it's like, it's up, philosophically, you can decide how you want to run it, but that's kind of how it thinks about it. In fact, the next slide.
What I end up doing is, if I may, is that I have like a lot of photos from a trip. So I open a new catalog for that trip. And typically I save the catalog in the same folder where all the trip photographs are, where I actually organize them between RAW and JPEG and separate them out. I do it combined. But if you have that on one hard drive, then everything is self-contained. You can open that catalog again and it'll find all the photos and all that. So, and then it remains manageable. But again, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
Right. Now, the other thing, again, I mentioned the philosophy of Lightroom. This catalog philosophy is incredibly important to get before you take a dive into Lightroom. And by the way, Sandeep did tell me that there's folks on this call who are newbies and there are folks in this call who are very advanced. So this is more like a newbie kind of talk. And I apologize to the advanced photographers if we're covering stuff that you already know. But keeping this concept of the catalog is quite important. And knowing that when you go to use your photographs for external purposes, you need to export the photos out of Lightroom through an export activity versus just leaving on your hard drive and just copying them and moving them over to like an email or something. Lightroom actually can handle all of those functions rather well. So when I go to a photography competition, for example, I'm a member of 3 or 4 photography clubs, and each one of them has different requirements for size, for file naming, for whatever, as you want to submit for a competition. So some of them want 4,000 pixels on a side for the long side. And then my local club in my town wants 1920 by 1080 for the maximum size. I just create a script and Lightroom handles it, and I can just export what I need when I need. And I've learned that this philosophical approach works pretty darn well. And I can keep all my, and this is the most important part, I keep all my raw files in the catalog and export JPEGs when needed. I actually have, in some cases, stopped shooting JPEGs altogether and just shoot the raw and leave them in the catalog because I can export what I need when I need it. Trying to switch slides again. Okay, so another thing that the catalog lets you do is deal with this concept of metadata. And the metadata really enhances the power of what you're able to accomplish in Lightroom by giving keywords to your files. In fact, every single photograph has northward of over 100 different pieces of metadata associated with it. Some of them are from the EXIF file that are part of the picture when it's shot in camera. And then there's some that you add to it that allow you then to sort, sift, and create cohorts of images based upon all these different categories. So for example, if you're shooting by file type, you can segregate into PNGs or JPEGs or RAW files, and just make with one click, just cull down to just those types of files. And if you color code them or you add stars to them for ratings or keywords, all of a sudden you really create new ways of being able to find your images later, beyond just the catalog, the subdirectory name. And that really gives it a lot of power.
So Steve, a question here. When you add metadata, is Lightroom capable of exporting that metadata to the JPEG file?
Yes, actually it is. So there's a setting in the export that lets you do that. And you know what, I'm going to keep let me put up a Evernote on my background here, and I'm going to keep a track of that so I can show you later. So give me a second. I'm going to just launch my Evernote and just keep like a parking lot of questions. How to export metadata. Okay. So I'll take you through the interface here once it decides to go there. And what you end up with Lightroom is you have several different panels that allow you to work with it. And on the left panel is your main list of is the catalog and main list of file folders and your collections. In the center is your actual previews. On the right, that changes. It's your develop module, and it also gives you your the views of your metadata. And at the bottom is a film strip that sort of helps you to sift through things. Now, there's other things at the top here are, and by the way, can you guys see my mouse as I'm pointing?
Yes, yes, yep. We can see.
Okay, along the top here are filters, and when you're in library mode, it'll allow you to really start using the power of the database features as a visual database. You have the ability to find things by text, by attribute, by metadata tag, and then by basically none. It clears the tags. Across the very top are the different modules, and we're going to go through several of these modules. The library module, develop, the map. I'm not going to cover book, slideshow, print, and web today. They're like talks in and of themselves, but we'll go through these in a live demo in just a second. I'm going to jump because I just covered 5 or 6 slides. Now, if you're looking at the navigator panel, which was the one on the left, it allows for nesting of directories just like on your hard drive. And these are pointers directly to the hard drive directories where the files are kept. And then you could do things where you could show just the one directory level or have it do a nested view and go down all the way. And like you click at the top level, show you everything below, or you can stop that and just look at what's in that particular level. And we'll go into a demo in just a second here. Okay, it says now jump to demo. So I'll jump over to the demo here and we will share go into Lightroom. Boy, not having the ability, Lightroom itself is not having that ability to share the full screen now is a problem, because Lightroom, when you share it in Zoom or any of these apps, the side windows don't show up as a complete window.
Yeah, that is a problem.
That is a problem. Huh. So what you're seeing now is just my center, isn't it?
No, we see the full.
No, no, we see the whole side panels and everything.
Oh, you do see the side panels?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So that's good. I didn't know that you could do that. So basically what I have here, as you can see here, I have things, my catalog is huge. And it's sorted by a year. So this is the second half of my 2017 data. This is 18, 19, and 20. And then below, these are hard drives that are offline, which Lightroom lets you look at the previews of data that you have offline, even though it can't find them, theoretically. And then below here are collections, and collections are, and this is what the bug that cropped up this morning is problematic with, and I don't know if I'll be able to build a collection because of it today, but effectively you can take your collections and then this becomes pictures from the catalog above that you have said, I want to see them in a very specific way. So I had a photography competition I'm getting ready for this month in one of my clubs, and these are the candidate images I'm going to use for that competition. And yeah, we've already did Stamford, so Rosemary hasn't even seen some of these. These are my candidates. I have to come up with 4 at the end, and then what I'll do is I would go and figure out what I would like, and I'd pick the 4 I like and create an export of those that would then I build them to size and scale so they'd be the right ones for my competition. And I go into a lot of competitions. So I have competitions for my club in Fishkill. I have PPA, which is Professional Photographers of America. These are candidate shots that I've come up with and how I got ready to present. But each one down here are PPA submissions that I've done. So for example, my PPA, these 4 shots that you see here are shots that I just submitted to an international competition, and all 4 of these actually got awards, and I can pop on those and show you. So that got a very high award. That's the highest, most awarded picture I've ever shot. It's called The Wind Beneath My Wings. I'll share some of these with you a little later once we get through the talk. So let's say that I wanted to, once I've figured out that I wanted to create all my collections, and I've organize them for what I want to do. And I can also build dynamic collections. And this is actually a really clever thing that they allow you to do. So I have a holding, let's see, where is the holding pen? Ready for competition. So this one, if you notice, there's a little gear on the icon inside of the navigator panel. And the gear means this is a smart collection. So everything in this collection is actually set up by a rule. And this is a dynamically generated collection, and it's generated with rules. And those rules are you able to see the smart collection editor that just popped up?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the name of it, Ready for Competition. And then I have it assigned to, the label has to be blue, and the rating has to be 5 stars. And anywhere in the entire collection of this collection has like 200,000 pictures. This catalog is 200,000 pictures. Anything with this setup of ratings will end up in this dynamically created collection. And then I can find things a lot easier. And what that has started to allow me to do is create really much more dynamic ways of thinking about my internal work. So a friend of mine owns a hotel, and I did a collection of everything from her hotel. They're trying to sell it. When they sell it, I'm going to be building a photo book for them. And these are all pictures I shot of her hotel over the past several years. And they're all tagged. They're not tagged. You'll notice they're not rated. They're just tagged because the word gateway is over here, which I added in my metadata tags under keywords. So I took the time of putting the word Gateway Lodge in my photos when I imported them. And then anytime the Gateway Lodge appears, this smart collection gives me the ability to find all of those. So this, and then this down here is a list of various smart collections that I've created. And there are collections of collections you can make, but you can start getting very sophisticated with the smart collections and using it according to keywords and making, you know, like this one is for everything that's red. At one point, I thought things that were red were going to be important. So this is all the pictures that are labeled red in the catalog. This is all the pictures that are shot in the past month. I've shot nearly 3,000 pictures in the last month. And this one's so dynamic that obviously if the past month changes, then, you know, this will automatically update. Likewise, the recently modified, these are ones that I've edited or worked on in the past so many weeks. And this is all the work that I've edited or at least looked at recently. And, you know, it goes on and on. So the power of really putting this together gives you the opportunity to really get smart about how you're going to use this.
Question, Steve?
Yeah, are there questions?
Yeah, I have a question. On the rules, do you have any, I know that there is a location features on the Lightroom. Do you have any geofencing capability? Like, for example, I want to see everything around Barcelona in the radius of X and then make that as a rule?
That's a really good question. And the answer is I don't know. I've not played with the map capability as much as I probably should. But what you can do for a smart collection, if you go to map, I guess you can make maps of this collections.
Yes, you do, but I'm talking about the smart rules. Is there anything?
Yeah, so you know what? I've never tried. So we could try that. We could make a collection. Let me try. We can make a project. We'll create a smart collection. And this is where you pick, let's see. I don't see metadata status, captions, job creator. I don't see map. Color.
Would it be in camera info maybe? Or location? Location?
You see location?
See, well.
Oh, I do. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you go, Sandeep. You can apparently, but I don't know if it's geomapping and like the way you geofencing, but you can find by country. That's a good. Yeah, thank you. I've never tried to do that. So, you know what? I could make a picture, a catalog real quick of shots of Israel. That's something I've been to. So let's try contains Israel. Let's see what happens. Wow, 4,000 images.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, that's all my shots from Israel.
Yeah, Stephen, it had sublocation or something also. So I have a feeling there might be a little more capability within.
There might be. By the way, I feel like I'm an expert at this program, but as you know, with Adobe applications, you could get a PhD in just one of these applications, I think. It can be so dense in terms of what's possible. And, you know, you've just seen, like, I didn't even think about that. And yep, it's possible.
So is this a requirement that the camera record the GPS? Or?
Yes, for that, it would be a GPS requirement, yeah. But the other way you can do it is what I've been doing over the years. I add metadata into the fields.
Yeah, that when you're importing, you can probably add that.
Right. So as you're bringing a photo in here, like, so this particular image has metadata over here on the right that says it's for competition, it's dawn, it's the location I put in is Sterling Farms, and the title of this image is Sterling Sunrise. And then I could find it by doing a search using one of these tools at the top. And that would allow me to find it much more quickly. Other questions?
I think carry on.
So let's go over to this panel over here a minute so we can talk about this, because what has to happen to get your photos in off your camera card or in from your hard drive is you have to tell Lightroom that they exist, and therefore you have to import the images. So when you import images, typically Lightroom we'll put them in by date. And I'm in 2020, and my 2020 list of images is now up to December. So we're at the bottom of the screen here. And 2020, I'm up to the 29th of November was the last time I imported anything in. This was a moonrise over the Merritt Parkway, which is a road near me. And this particular list of images is a time-lapse clip by each individual image. I do a lot of time-lapse photography, and Lightroom, there's a special tool that you can use to actually leverage Lightroom to do bulk editing on a time-lapse sequence. But this one doesn't have not much metadata, but others will. This is shots from a local airport. And if I was going to let's metadata tag this one. This is from airplanes. And it also is a picture from Sikorsky. And this is from Milford, Connecticut. And then that applied the metadata, and you can tell this little pencil tells you you've added metadata to these images. And all these images can then be found by having this metadata. You can also go further, and there are tools in the metadata tool window to do this in bulk and do it really quickly. And you can create a whole array of metadata tags and really keep them organized. And if you look at the keyword list, all of a sudden I've created all these different keywords. And if I click on ants, we'll see what ants shows me. This picks all the pictures up of ants. And there's 3 images I've tagged with the word ants, and it's a bunch of ants eating something. Some lizard looks like. And that's how you find it. So if there's a couple of takeaways, metadata tagging your images is an enormous help. I mean, I can't overemphasize how much it gives you power over your information. And it's the kind of thing that if you take the time to do it, you will. And by the way, if you look here, this is what I have without keywords, and there's 300,000 images without keywords. So do as I say, not as I do. But for the ones that where it matters, it is quite helpful. So let's go back over here to the navigator window. This is your metadata and EXIF data window over here. And there are ways, so when I took a trip to the Galapagos a few years ago, and I forgot to change the time setting, the time zone setting on my camera. And when I got back, I like to sort things by time sometimes. So, it turns out Lightroom has tools that let you even edit the time that something was shot. So let's say, for example, these were from my South Africa trip. I happen to remember that. And if I didn't shoot those properly, there is a field where it says, where the devil they put it, where you can actually change the time metadata. Here we go. So edit capture time. So I could go in here into this window, and the original time was shot at, this one's okay, but it says at 3:33 p.m. on the 22nd of December. If I knew it was off by a time shift, by a time zone, I could click on the time zone. I could tell me how many hours it needs to shift by, and then it will actually overwrite that metadata, and then you can find you can find by that and set it up properly. Because it turns out having time settings, timestamps correct in your catalog matter. It just helps you really identify things more quickly.
Stephen, was that on the tool on top bar? We can't see
metadata.
Oh, okay, because we can't see the top bar.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's under, I don't, and we've just discovered before this talk that Zoom has disallowed showing of your entire desktop. Like we found out 5 minutes before we started.
Right, it's metadata, so that's great. Okay.
Are you seeing that window open?
No, we see the drop down. We don't see the top.
You see the drop down
option.
Okay, you see the drop down. Okay, but under here you can change, edit the presets, edit times. You can save metadata, and there are reasons why you want to change metadata, and I can talk through that in a little while, because that's where, when you're doing time-lapse editing, it happens that you use the metadata from it to really leverage the power of Lightroom for doing bulk editing. So anyway, back over here. When you pick an image, you can basically edit all these things or even add comments. And then much of this information can export with the image as either a sidecar file if it's raw, or it can be embedded in the JPEG. And all of this information goes along for the ride. Now, it gives you an option on that. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't, depending on how much privacy you want to have, or if you want to have things copyrighted. I like to leave the metadata in because I just never know where it's going to turn up, and I don't want my work being copied or stolen. So I like to have the metadata in there, but it's personal preference. You don't have to. By the way, are all of you familiar with the histogram and how that works?
No, we would like you to take us through that.
Okay. We'll go through the, I put together a little directory of images for this talk.
I was going to make a comment that your histograms all look so well balanced. I'd love to see how you do that.
Okay. Well, we'll go through a bunch of these, and we'll do some before and after shots. And I picked out some before and after shots for the develop mode, and we'll go through that. So why don't we go through? Okay, this is a great shot for before and after. So I'm going to jump over to the folder that has that original file, which is this shot from my drone from Bear Mountain. And this is going to be an important comparison. This is, okay, this is the original shot. So I'm going to start having a conversation now, and I want people to talk to me. What do you see in this shot versus what you saw when I flipped over to the edited version? So tell me a couple, whoops, why did it do that? Okay, there's the edited version.
Wow.
And here's the before. By the way,
the clouds.
Oh,
so we'll talk about that. So I'm going to show you 3 or 4 different versions of this, because this has been made for competition. And here are the 4 versions, or 3 versions. Hold on. Adding a 4th version. So the original is the one in the upper left.
Mm-hmm.
And then these are different versions of the same image. So somebody tell me what you see.
So the upper left is very pale. It is all dull.
It's extremely pale. That's right. The natural clouds are all pushed to one side,
Mm-hmm.
and they're really not too interesting. The fall colors are really muted, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yep.
They're miserable.
Yeah,
But it's
very
very
low saturation.
low saturation. They don't really give a sense of autumn, or at least autumn here.
Mm-hmm.
This was shot from a drone, but the beauty of this image, the very beautiful thing about this image is, if you look down at the bottom here, you see the name of it. I'm going to just click on this one independently. Notice that it says DNG. So DNG is the Adobe Digital Negative file format, which is basically a wrapper for RAW. And it's a standard that's come out lately that, if you know about RAW files, by the way, if anybody on this talk is shooting JPEGs only, please hang up and go home. If you're a professional photographer or even a good amateur, you got to just get out of the habit of using JPEGs, unless you're just shooting snapshots for some kid's graduation or something. The reason is that JPEGs is a lossy digital compression algorithm that it literally strips away something on the order of 90%, 80 to 90% of the digital data that's in the image. A RAW file contains all of the natural data that the sensor saw, every single bit. And the difference basically is that if this was a JPEG, I would not be able to do what I'm about to show you how to do. So you can have a change in dynamic range in a RAW file that can border on 4 stops plus or minus. In a JPEG, you're lucky if you have a dynamic range of 1.5 stops on each side of exposure and other settings, because there's simply no data there. And that's a big problem. But the other thing about these shots we talked about a moment ago was, I took some liberties with this. And I think Sandeep mentioned before we talked that you wanted to hear about ethical editing. So I used to have a problem with this whole concept of should I do things like change the sky. And a lot of what I do these days is for competition. And for photography competitions, it turns out, unless the competition has explicit rules not to change anything, the expectation is to change as much as possible and use as much photoshopping to make the images high quality as you can. And now there is one category in the PSA, Photography Society of America, which is different than PPA, that is a nature category. And nature category explicitly says you're not allowed to like digitally alter images other than very mild things like putting a vignette in or changing or making it darker. You can't clone things in a image. You can't remove objects. There are very specific rules for that. But short of that, almost every other photography competition I've ever been in actually encourages you to edit and make them as best as possible. And if you look really carefully at these, and I'll go from one to the other here. So on this image here, this is the original image. And then this is the one that I competed with. And if you zoom in on here, there's a couple of other things I've done. So one thing is I've removed some cars, which I thought were a distraction. I've changed the sky because it didn't. Sorry? Is there a question?
No, it was a cough. Continue.
Oh, I've changed the sky and I've increased the saturation. So I'm going to take you through everything except, well, I can even try some of the removal here. So this is when you enter the develop. Let's say this is the image you want to work with. And we're going to create a, go back to the library view. And now we're going to select this one image and we're going to go to the develop view. And now you'll notice that the right hand has just changed, and the right hand column now has a bunch of tools. And there's a way to think about images when you go to begin your editing process. So raw images, because they have so much data, they don't actually apply any algorithms to really show any enhancement. But as you've seen, there's a lot of information here. Aside from the sky, I didn't add colors so much as change the data that was already there. So the first thing I look at is the exposure right? And somebody commented that my histogram, which is over here, looks fairly good for most of my images. That's not by accident. I try very hard in camera before I get to Lightroom to keep my histograms in a good spot. But you do notice here, there's a lot of white in here, and there's white in here because the sky's a little blown out. So we'll deal with that in a minute. And one of the things that raw images straight out of a camera, whether it's the drone or your DSLR, they tend to be flat. They tend to really not emphasize the darks, and they desaturate things a little bit. The JPEG that's accompanying most files that comes out of a camera tends to be algorithmically warmed up or algorithmically added some darks. And it's all a formula that the camera manufacturers have put in. And it's sort of like doing a pre-process in Lightroom, but in camera, and then it looks a little bit better. If this was shot with a sidecar file from the camera, would have the JPEG, I guarantee you this would look a lot more saturated and a lot more darks. But here's how we start thinking. So I look at this image and I say to myself, first and foremost, is the exposure look good? And if it's not, I work on the exposure and bring it up or down. This exposure, at least for the bulk of the image, looks pretty good. So I'm going to leave that alone. The next thing I look at is is the white balance work? Is it too green? Is it too yellow? Is it too blue or too magenta? So the color temperature and the tint are two pieces that really you got to think through at the very earliest part of your editing to sort of get right. So this image, to me, I think might get warmed up a little bit. And if I warm it up, you'll start seeing some of the colors may get a little more enhanced. But then it tends more to the blue. And I do play with it a little bit and see if there's what I can do with that. But and I do notice there was an original, it was not reset. I'm going to reset everything to zeros on this. This was the original view right there. That's what it came out of the camera. And notice the blacks here are very chunky and dark, but because it's raw, I know I can bring some of those back. We'll it's a little hot. We'll change the white balance a little bit. And then I like to look at clarity, add a little clarity there. And I think this image needs some contrast. And we need to bring the shadows back. The shadows are a little too much. And then we have to darken it a little bit. And we need to get, we're still not getting those colors right. And the reason why, as somebody said it earlier, saturation. Well, it's vibrance. You bring a little vibrance and you bump a little bit on the contrast with the vibrance and a touch of saturation. And you may need to pull back a little bit. And now we're starting to approach things that look a little bit better. And if I add a little dehaze, we're approaching it yet more. And then I'm looking at this and I'm like, you know, there's still a lot of oranges. There's still a lot of reds that just aren't coming out. Well, why is that? Well, because I've been doing global changes across the entire image up here. And, you know, for the most part, the image doesn't look too bad, but I know there's more information here that I want to get to. And it's going to be by going down to this panel here called HSL, and that stands for hue, saturation, and luminance. And this is where you can really start to play with things. And, you know, it's autumn, so I happen to know that the oranges are really needed to be bumped up a little bit because there's a lot of oranges. There's a lot of reds. Now, you don't want to overdo it. And contrary to what you might think, you might want to actually turn down the luminance of the greens a little bit to make room for the reds and the oranges, and maybe pull back on some of the yellows. And as you start to play with this, you'll start seeing that you are beginning to get more of the colors of interest to come in here. And then, by the way, you can always, with the Y, there's a view where you can look at it and say before and after. It's the Y key on Lightroom. And the before and after lets you sort of see where you've been and where you're going. And that's something you can bump into with some selectivity. Now, I kind of want a little more of the reds, and I'm going to add more with the hue. I'm taking my yellows and bringing some of them closer to orange. And you got to be careful. You can't overdo this, because if you do, it gets to be looking too artificial. And it still, to me, feels like I'm missing some darks. There's just something about this that feels like maybe I've overdone it on the shadows or the blacks, but it's just not pulling around. So we want to just, and I wish I could tell you that there was a formula for this, but it's something that you just have to get to know. A lot of times there might be a little too harsh on the whites. And if you look here, see, we're now starting to get some of those colors pulled back in here and getting the nature of this done better. So I don't know that I've gotten it all the way to here, right? So this is where I ended up. I won't go through the entire thing. But once I got to the point that I liked it, now a couple other things. Nobody called out that when you look at my shots together, nobody called out that I have a black matte on the image. I'm actually surprised nobody mentioned that. But it turns out that for many of the competitions that I participate in, it turns out that the showing your image with a finished state actually matters. And you get points for, and not even figurative, but like literal points for good presentation. So you can mock up the mattes like I tend to do. I've gotten a lot of coaching from professional photographers that a very simple black matte, not a white matte, tends to really help things pop and really helps you concentrate on the image in the center. And in an image like what you're seeing here, it matters. But I also noticed that there's something I forgot to do to this image. I'll go back to the develop mode. I forgot to mention is adding a vignette. And a vignette actually darkens the sides and helps bring your eye into the center. And then that's getting closer to where I ended up before. And as you go through this, there's no one way, there's no right way, but you've got to learn, what looks good to your eye. And by the way, I didn't mention calibrating your monitor. If you don't do this with a calibrated monitor, you could go to all this trouble and make it look beautiful on your monitor, go to print it, and it looks, wrong. So I recently purchased, not recently, I recently purchased a brand new one because it didn't work under Catalina, something called a Spider from Data Color, which actually gives you an absolute monitor calibration with a photospectrometer inside the tool, and it helps you make sure that the colors you see are what the colors that you get at the end of your processing. And believe me, that matters. It really, really matters. It just cost me another $170 to get another, get a new one that works with my operating system. And I'll just say, call out to Apple for stopping all my hardware from working under the new operating system. That was really fun.
So Stephen, what's the size of that monitor?
The one I'm on right now, this is a built-in monitor on my iMac, which is 27 inches.
Mm-hmm. No, the Spider, did you say, is that a...
Oh, it's not a monitor, it's a calibrator. Let me go pick it up and show you, hold on.
Sorry, guys.
I'm not showing you this. I'm not advertising anything. I'm not making money on, not making any money on this, but this is a Data Color Spider X. When Zoom isn't trying to overwrite it. And this sits in front of your monitor and it reads the colors. And it also takes into account ambient light in your work area. And it really gives you it's all, if you're going to do this in any kind of meaningful way, it's almost an absolutely essential tool. So
great.
So
Steve, would you also go through how to create the matte?
Yes, I will.
Great.
So the matte you can't do in Lightroom. So let's start there. And a couple of other things I can't do in Lightroom. So and I'm also going to create this as a virtual copy. I don't want to work on this original. So I've just created a virtual copy, which means anything I do to this will not affect the original. But I'm going to open the virtual copy in Photoshop. Edit in, and you tell me if you're seeing my menus pop. I don't know if you are or not.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to pop over to Photoshop, which means I'm going to have to change the share to share in Photoshop. So I'm going to stop the share. And I'm going to pop over to Photoshop. I can find it. There it is. Okay, are you seeing my entire Photoshop window?
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing that you see here is that it comes into Photoshop locked. So the very, very first thing I do is I unlock it by clicking on the lock. And then I create a duplicate layer. And this is because I like to have non-destructive workflows in my Photoshop work. And that's something that is not unique to me, but it is a philosophical thing. I mean, philosophically, you need to decide if you're going to be doing destructive or non-destructive work in Photoshop. The difference is file size. Non-destructive work in Photoshop makes your files enormous. Like this photo.
I believe we are not seeing the right side of your screen, so we couldn't see your mouse. I guess I misspoke when I said we do see your entire Photoshop. We don't see the right panel.
The tools and layers are not visible. Can you hit the plus on your upper right 3 dots and see if that helps? The maximize on the frame on the top, yeah, that one. And see if that helps. No, sorry.
I dock them, does it help?
No, that doesn't help. That just escape it. Make it a little bit smaller on the right. And your canvas to be a little smaller too, maybe. Your right side bar is completely out, not visible.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about now?
No, not yet. I think better now. Yes.
Can you see the layers now?
Yeah, we can see it now. Oh,
Yeah.
Better.
Okay, so I have to have them docked in the window. Okay. That's not my preferred way of working, but we'll deal.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go back to layers. So the first thing I like to do.
Out, so I don't know, again, all the tools are not visible. Pop-ups are, but not the original.
I think he collapsed the tools.
Is that what he did? Okay.
I only collapsed one of them.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. That's fine.
If I pop open layers, you can see it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So from layers, I make a separate layer first and foremost. Then I decide, for my competition shots, we have, when I go to print these, they have to be 16 by 20, inclusive of the matte. And the reason it's 16 by 20 is many of the clubs that I show in or compete in, they have maximum sizes for the boards that go on the physical show board. I can actually go in my main club in Stamford, I can go up to, I think, 20 by 24, but I have another limitation. I can't print that big on my own home printer. I can only print the 16 by 20. So I get everything to a 16 by 20 frame. So, and I happen to know that what I need to do here is I need this image to be 17 by 12.75. So I go to image size. Are you seeing all this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And I know that I need this image to be 17 inches wide and 12.75. That's close enough for jazz. And I change the image size. I don't change the resolution. I need it to resample it so it stays at 240 DPI. And now this is set up so that I can now add the canvas. I add a canvas shell to it. And I change the canvas size to 20 by 16. And you'll see what this does momentarily. It creates a border. And now I'm going to add 2 layers. One layer gets pulled down in the background. And when I change the colors to over here to black, and I paint it black, there you go. There's your black matte. But you also notice that there's a stroke around it, and the stroke matters too. In competition, at least in PPA competitions, they tell you to put a stroke around it. So I do a selection, which is you got to select the image itself. And on the above layer, I want this stroke to be slightly larger than the image itself. Again, this is personal preference. This is not formulaic. And I make this go to half an inch larger, which goes from 12.75. So I need to go to 13.25. And then this goes to 17.5. That makes it a selection. And then I pick a color from the image itself using the color picker tool, the eyedropper tool. And I'm going to pick this orange. And you'll see that the orange is selected over here. And I'm going to go edit, stroke, a 3-pixel stroke on the inside of the selection, hit select, deselect, and that image would be ready for competition, theoretically, if I happen to like the sky. I don't like the sky here. And I still think it's a little too, this image is a little too bright. It needs to be toned down a little bit. So we'll do a few other tricks in Photoshop. I'm going to go into Adobe Camera Raw, which can be found under Filter, and then where the hell did I stash it? Adaptive wide angle. Here, Camera Raw filter. And I know all the keystrokes anymore. I don't even know the. Is it showing Camera Raw?
Yeah.
It popped open. You can see the Camera Raw window.
Yes.
Okay. Camera Raw is a one-off version of Lightroom, believe it or not, or Lightroom is a version of Camera Raw. And I've noticed here that I think this would look better if this whole image was a slightly bit darker. And I add a touch more contrast. So I'm doing the same things I did in Lightroom, playing with this a little bit more. And I think if I add a touch more clarity, it'll look a little bit better. Maybe some texture. So I've just kind of enhanced it a bit. And now here's another issue is that I don't like I don't really like the sky. The sky is kind of distracting. The clouds are on one side, and that's not a helpful thing. So in the background, what I'm going to do is I'm bouncing back to Lightroom in the background. I'm sorry that you can't see it, but I have a smart collection that has got clouds in it. And I'm going to find a background that I happen to like that has some clouds that I want to use in my smart collections. And I'm spending a moment here to leaf through to find a cloud background that I like that won't interfere with what's going on here. I found one that's a little bit better. I'm going to pop that open in Photoshop too. Sorry that you can't see everything. I think it's a real pain that they've changed how this works for Zoom. And I'm back in Photoshop. And now I think these clouds, these nice little cirrus clouds might look better in this picture, maybe, we'll see. So what I'm going to do is I'm pulling this, I'm going to undock that image so I can pull the cloud image into this image, okay? And I'm going to just turn off things like the background and stuff. We're going to just work on the sky. I'm going to turn off because what I need to do here is I need to create a mask that'll turn this off. So I'm getting into some sophisticated stuff here momentarily, but I'm going to do a selection of just the sky and the clouds, and I'm going to create a mask that turns them off. And then you'll see the trick I'm going to do to put the cloud layer behind it and then put everything else back in position, and it'll all come together in the end. So what I'm going to do is I use a selection tool, and I'm going to use the quick selection tool here. I'm going to select over the sky, and it's already selected. Can you see the marching ants?
Yes.
You see the marching ants here?
Yeah.
What I'm going to do is I click on this mask.
Your left tool bar is not visible, so you might just describe the quick select there, this bunch of them, right? So selection tools.
Okay, the quick select tool is looks like a, is it popping up when I pop on it?
Yeah.
It just barely
Yes.
pops up, like half of it is gone.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say, guys. It's unfortunate they did this to us.
Okay.
That's it. It's W or quick select. And now I'm going to create a mask, and where I'm going to, generally what happens is things that are, when you click on the mask tool, add layer mask, if you click on the mask itself, it'll show what you've selected, or if you hit Option and click on it, it will mask away what you've shown on it. So now I've cut that away, right? And now we're going to put this other picture back, and we're going to drop it behind the other picture. We're going to arrange it here. We're going to change the size of it so it fits into the size of the scale here. And there's, I can't go too high because the trees are going to pop in. That might look better at the end of the day. Okay, so let's say I like that. And well, that's all well and good, but now if I go to put my image back together, you notice that there's a problem here, which is that I don't have a mask that just shows the black. So the way to fix that is you do a selection, option click on, not option, command click on the original image, create yet another blank layer, put that blank layer above, and invert your selections, because right now I've selected just the main body, but invert the selection with inverse and paint black on that. Whoops, paint black on that. And you've got basically a virtual frame over things, and it hides everything below it. And now you've replaced the sky. And frankly, the sky, I don't think you can tell that I've done a replacement. I mean, it looks pretty good. It meshes pretty well. If you look in there, you don't see any halos. You don't see any, and even here where there's a dip in the selection, it did it well. Now, it's not always that easy. It's not always that clean, but it can, you know, it can be. So that's kind of
touch upon the topaz tools that you might have for clean,
sorry?
For the clean extraction of the sky or any other piece. You have some other tools that you're using, right?
I do. And I guess the question is
briefly on that and move to the whatever flow.
Yeah, I could do that. We can go back to that, but let me just say that for simple things, you don't need extra tools. Photoshop is sufficient. But let's go to a different, I'm going to just abandon all this. I mean, it's extra. I'll save it, whatever. And there's a little trick you got to be aware of back in Lightroom. And I will take this and go back to Lightroom for just a moment because you need to see this. When you edit things in through Lightroom, Lightroom will sometimes do it right, but not always do it right, in that it will sometimes add it back to the collection, back to your original directory, but sometimes it won't. And that's a problem because you then have to do what's called a synchronization. And let me find, so I got to go back and find where I was working, which was back in, I got to turn off my, this was using a, oh, great. So I remember I mentioned that bug that popped up this morning. It's manifesting itself. There we go. Okay. Oh, okay, I wanted to go back and show you what we were doing. I want to show you that. Got to go to the projects. The ITT class. Getting back to the place where you were editing in here can get a little tedious. So I want to go back to the original folder in the library. This is the folder. Now, the work we just did is not going to show up in here because when you when you save with a new file name, Photoshop and Lightroom don't play as well together. You need to do a directory synchronization at the end. You synchronize the folder, and it will look in there. Oh, did it save it? Maybe it did. Didn't find a new one, so maybe it saved it properly. In any event, I don't see it in here. Oh, all right. In any event, that's what you need to do. Oh, here it is. It's right here. The ITT class. It did save it properly. Sometimes your work doesn't come back to Photoshop properly, Lightroom properly, and you have to do a synchronization to refine the image. But now this is the image, and it's ready for use in a competition if I wanted to. And by the way, the lighting isn't quite right. I'd have to go back and fix it. It's too dark now, and we could putz with it for a while, but we won't. Now, Sandeep wanted to go and show you how to do a file extraction with a masking tool. So I'll take you over to...
I would actually not want to improve your flow, so if others are interested, you can do it. Otherwise, we could just continue with your normal flow and take it at the end if you have time, because there's a lot of packed agenda right for you. So.
Well, you still have a lot of slides on your Lightroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think we should finish that.
Well, the Lightroom is a lot of slides because there's a photo show at the end of it. So I've been talking through a lot of what's in the slideshow as we've been going. So I don't want you to think you're missing, because I'll give you the slideshow and you can look through it for reference. But we've been talking through almost all of it as we've been going. I mean, I'm leafing through the slides. We haven't talked about, keywording. We have talked keywording. We haven't talked about keystrokes and things like that, or sorting. Let me see what else we might have missed.
I thought you were going to kind of talk about adjusting the histogram in terms of looking at something maybe extremely to the right or to the left in terms of too white or too dark.
Yeah, so let's do that. Let me find a good image where we could adjust that well. There's an image I have of trying to think of a good example of where to do the histogram, change.
Because I've taken some pictures of, say, a moon, and when you take that, it just turns out completely to the left in terms of the sky being dark, and then to correct that becomes sometimes difficult. So I just want to learn that part. Well, that's you can't show your picture and say this is how it should look.
Well, do you want me to show you a moonshot and we can process one?
Sure.
Okay. So this is this one's actually not adjusted. So when you shoot certain topics like the moon, and I haven't even shown you my astrophotography, which is a whole different lecture, and it's a long one. I can share some of that with you towards the end if there's some time. But the histogram on this one, like I said, I try to fix this in camera. So for some of these things, because you're shooting raw, if you got stuff, as long as it doesn't clip in the lights or in the darks, there's probably it's easy enough to find your data in there. So if I take this image and I go into the develop mode, when I was working on the exposure, by the way, you'll notice that the histogram is moving at the top. Do you see that?
Yep.
And the objective is, in most images, you want your histogram relatively even. You don't want it to be too far to one side or the other. And right now I've bumped it up by 0.85 stops, but this is where it was naturally shot. I have a lot of experience in shooting the moon, so I know that I need to shoot underexposed. This image was shot, if I go to my metadata, if I leave the develop and go back to metadata, this should say it's been shot under, maybe it doesn't say it. Over here in the metadata here, it doesn't say it's under or over, but this was shot about 1.5 to 2 stops underexposed, because otherwise the moon gets way, way, way too bright.
Right.
And the moon gets blown out. So if you're shooting things like the moon or moon rises or sunsets, you got to stop. You've got to stop trusting your camera's internal meter. It looks, either you can put the meter just on the moon, and then it'll, you can go from a full matrix of things down to an individual small frame, or you just ignore it and use manual. And I go and use manual when I shoot the moon. And I do that intentionally so that I can get the details. Otherwise, it all gets completely blown out. Now, I can show you some old stuff I did at the moon where it did get blown out. Let's see. Let's go up here and I will do a quick search for moon. Let's see if these are going to be, and this is actually a good sample. So here, this image of the moon, and it's been edited, the moon's a little too bright. And what I should do is I should knock that back a little bit and see if by bringing it back and adding a little contrast or some clarity, I could bring it back. And let's just bring it down a little bit. Notice the histogram driving the whole histogram down. And the more I bring it down, the better the moon looks. And so the problem is that in one exposure, you might be caught in one exposure where that's not going to work for you because the rest of the image doesn't work. But there's tricks to this. And the tricks to this can be applied selectively, so you can just fix the moon and you can leave the rest of the image alone. Right? So let's do that. So I'm going to reset the image. And I'm going to try to do a trick to this. I think the rest, if I fix the shadows in the rest of the image, I can bring some of that back, get details back in there that I like. And you'll notice, I'm not going to worry about the moon for a second, but the moon is not so hot. All right, so I've adjusted this and my histogram looks pretty good. The moon is blown out. But let's say we want to fix that. So these tools across the top in the develop module are very, very powerful. Now, and they've gotten more powerful in the most recent versions of Lightroom. I'm going to use, you could do one of several things, and there's no right way or wrong way to do it. Well, there's wrong ways to do it, but there's never any one right way. So I'm going to pick this circular gradient tool, and I'm going to make a circle around the moon. Do you see that? Notice I've gotten bigger than the moon. And if I just now darken it, I got to reverse it, by the way, sorry. That tool works with that invert button at the bottom. But do you see here, there's a,
Yep.
You see that halo?
Mm-hmm.
That halo is not good. That's bad. So you could do one of two things. You could try to bring this in and get it right closer to the sides, but I will posit that the halo will remain. Especially during moonrise, the moon does not appear to be a perfect sphere. And if I were to start playing with it just like that, you know, I could add some clarity and some texture. And I'm bringing back some of that in the moon, darken the shadows. I could darken the whole moon. Notice though that it's problematic. It's doing it in a differential way. And if I zoom out, now it looks really crappy. That's not good. That's a terrible edit. But we can fix that edit because they've introduced a new tool in Lightroom. I'm going to turn that back on. And I'm going to actually make this whole edit bigger than the moon. And I've got that halo, which we're going to get rid of in a real trick in a moment. So down here, there's a new tool that was just introduced in the last 2 versions of Lightroom called the range mask. And I'm going to tell it that I want to pick the colors that are just in the moon to work on. By clicking on the moon, then I adjust the feathering on that, make it a little bigger. And by the way, if I go out to here and add another, oops, I went too far. Now you are seeing I'm getting some edging here, which I don't want. Maybe we don't want to use color. Maybe we should change it to luminosity. And we'll pick the bright stuff in the moon only. And now this should be working on the luminosity, which is, I just want the brightest part of that image. And now we're getting a little less hate. By the way, there's other ways of doing this that are much even cleaner than this. See, it's still not as homogeneous as I'd like it to be without that halo, that brown halo.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try the color again. We'll go back to the color. See, where I would do this even better is in Photoshop. I would move this to Photoshop and do do 2 exposures. And I can show you how to do that actually. But what you're seeing is that then I can start putzing around with this. By the way, that's how you see the mask. If you hit the O key, it lets you see the mask. And I can darken it. Now the whole image looks a little cleaner. Now the moon doesn't look quite right. We should do this in Photoshop. It depends on how sophisticated you want me to get, but I can bring this whole image into Photoshop because that's the right place to do this.
Right.
Would you like me to take it into Photoshop and show you that?
I think it'll help because this is probably a good way to demonstrate, you know, what works sometimes, what doesn't work, and where you go,
Sure.
And what you choose. I think that's a good kind of demo.
Okay, so I'm going to take this image into Photoshop and I'm going to stop the Lightroom share and hopefully go back to Photoshop. Share screen. Photoshop. Okay. Again, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a duplicate layer. I always make a duplicate layer because I don't want to destroy the pixels under that I'm working on. I can turn it off, but it's always there. It's the original file. And now for this, you know, I only really want the moon and I want to fix the background. So let's go with Adobe Camera Raw first. And I'm going to just bump the shadows here and bring back some of the detail that I've lost in the darks, and then add some darks and texture back to it. Okay, so that's good enough for jazz for now. So now I've got all those darks pulled back and I can see details in the trees, which is good. And now moon, let's work on the moon. So I'm going to create a small selection of the moon. And I'm going to just do a Command J, which creates a new layer just of that. And I'm going to zoom in and we're going to just work on this new layer. Okay, so there's a number of ways we could work on this. One of them is I could do a selection and mask away the outer part of the moon. Let's see how well that would work. And that's not terrible. That's using the quick select tool that we talked about earlier. And I could then go to increase the selection by using the expand. We can try that by 2 pixels and see what that gets us. And you'll see that it's a little too much. So I'm going to try to use this quick select tool in a zoomed way to get closer. See if I can smoothly connect what I want. See, this isn't the greatest selection tool, but there are better selection tools out there. And this one that I've used called the Mask AI, I can take us into Mask AI if we want to go there. But this isn't horrible. And what we do is then we make a mask. Wrong mask. And I will then, if you could look at the mask, you can see what you're looking at by hitting the option, click on the mask. Or I can turn the mask off. And notice that rim is still there, and that really bugs me. But so we're going to go in here and we're going to paint with black paint on the mask. So as the saying goes, white reveals and black conceals. So I'm going to paint using the regular paintbrush, standard paintbrush. And I'm going to use a smallish brush. And I'm going to carefully go around this with black paint to remove that edge. This is a kind of a dicey way to do it. There's probably better ways, but I really don't want that edge in there. And Topaz has a masking tool, which we could jump to and could test that in a minute. That's not too bad, but let's see how it looks against the real image. Okay, there it is against the real image. That looks pretty good, actually. That looks pretty good. So now we're going to just do a little Adobe Camera Raw just on the moon. We'll zoom in on that. And now we're going to putz with this. We're going to darken it a little bit. And we're going to add some detail, some patterns. And remember, this brown stuff around the sides is going to be masked away. We're not going to see it. And if it's not masked as well as we would like, we can go in here and we can adjust the mask by deleting more of the mask in here. Again, go to the brush, paint with black. Sorry, paint with white. See, I went too far. But you get the idea.
Stephen, what's the resolution at which this photograph has been taken? Because the moon looks so small and yet it contains so much of details.
Yeah, so this was shot at, this is right out of the camera. So this image size is 4,288 by 2,844.
Okay, thanks a lot.
So if I was doing this for real, I would putz with it a lot more and work on it. Now the moon doesn't look quite that dark. So one way we could have done that was with an adjustment layer, and we can add a brightness adjustment layer on here. This is a non-destructive way. And then I could just, by the way, oh, and I forgot to mention, I got to go back to layers a minute. In the layers palette, when you do an adjustment layer, if you don't do a clipping adjustment layer, this adjustment layer will work on the entire image. So if I actually adjust it the way it is, it opens up the entire image or it darkens the entire image. But if I use the adjustment layer clipping version, which is over by layer, create clipping mask, now it's only adjusting the layer immediately below it. And now I can change just the moon. And you got to be careful because if you do too much to the moon, it just won't look real. That looks pretty good, actually. Mm-hmm. And if I go back to my original layers, I can turn these two off and see how it looks versus the original image. That's the original. There's the new. There's the new with the adjustment layer. That's not too bad.
Very good. Yeah,
It's not too bad.
it's quite.
I could bring in more of these clouds and make the clouds look nicer if I wanted to, using similar technique. You know, if you'd like me to do that, we can do that as well. I haven't dug into any of my really sophisticated filters and tools. We do have about half an hour left from what I planned on talking through. If you'd like me to go into some of that, I can. But this is a good way, you know, learning layer masking is really how you get to the next level of work. You can only go so far in Lightroom, is the bottom line. Let me turn this one off and go back to Lightroom.
Can we, in the meanwhile, do the pulse check as far as the timing, Raghu?
I'm good for another half an hour is what I planned for.
I think I am okay. Rest of the audience has to say.
I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, I think
I'm good. Next
Is this hitting? Is this hitting the kinds of things you're interested in?
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And if anything specific anybody wants to see, I think it might be useful too, other than if, Steve, you have anything specific to mention, that's good too.
Well,
but
if you want to see some of the, you guys tell me if you want me to show you some of the Astro work. It's a very specific topic. Sandeep mentioned it earlier on, but I don't have to. You know, I did have a
does require, I think, fair amount of focused and sophisticated kind of, you know, commitment. So I'm not sure whether everybody is into it, but I think this focusing on a basically general concepts of snaps it, take and want to enhance it. I think this covers a lot. So we could probably do a separate one in future if there is an interest.
Well, let me.
I don't know, what do you guys say?
I'll give you a teaser later, but let me just walk you through some of my better shots, and
Yeah.
we'll also we talk about compositing very briefly. So I'll just do a quick walkthrough. I just put a little collection together and a walkthrough of some of the shots I've done, some before and afters as well. So we'll just leaf through some of these. This is one I call Night Lights, and the moon could be better on here, but the moon, that is kind of the moon's not really edited too much in that one. And when a moon is rising, it's awfully fuzzy because you're shooting through a lot of atmosphere. This is the Stamford Lighthouse that's over not too far from my home. This is a Milky Way shot. This is a little overcooked, but it is a Milky Way, one of the Astro shots. This is a shot of basically star trails. This is about 5 or 6 hours worth of star trails up in Vermont. These are some lightning shots of a local park near our home in Connecticut. This is 3 shots layered together. This is actually a real shot. Believe it or not, this was not composited. I was shooting after a thunderstorm in New Jersey, and lightning and a rainbow appeared at the same time. And I was chasing this particular storm, and it almost cost me my car because I got caught in a flash flood, and the water rose in the parking lot to almost 2 feet, and it nearly destroyed my Lexus. And I got the car out just in the nick of time. But this was a real shot in New Jersey 2 years ago. This was an award winner called Wise Guy. Some macro shots of just a frog, a blue dart frog. This one is a debatable for competition. It's that I'm debating to put in competition. This is called Picnic Crashers or Picnic Crasher. This image is one, I'm not sure why it's coming up so noisy, but this is one that was shot that actually just won an award called Bad Hair Day. Shot for the PPA International Photography Competition.
Yeah, great captions.
So Steve, you just mentioned something that alerted me. So is there a way to work with noise reduction?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, you could switch to that whenever you're done with this. That will be great.
Okay, there's actually many ways of dealing with noise reduction. And we could even take this one in a minute. I don't think this is my competitive shot. Oh, it is. This is the competitive shot. So if I wanted to, the problem with noise reduction in Lightroom is that can kill your details, but there are inside this details panel is noise reduction.
Yeah.
And if I were to push on this a little bit up, some of that noise will theoretically go away, but you notice that I'm losing detail. And for this image in particular, you know, there's a lot of, this isn't noise. This is actually light reflected off of the sunflowers, the leaves. But there are images where noise can be a serious problem. I could bump that up a little bit and it would take some of that away, but at the expense of detail. But this one was an award winner at the recent international competition. This one I was going to compete with, but got some feedback not to because the front claws were not.
Stephen, if I may interject, if you go back to the previous one, I noticed that you did not do anything with sharpening a part of the detail panel.
Right, on this one, I didn't need to on this one. This one is really tack sharp, so I didn't have to go in there and do anything like that. But because if you look at the detail on this one is just tack sharp.
Right, right.
If I wanted to bump that sharpness, you know, it probably would add a little bit of. It might make it look what they call too crunchy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So the question over there that I have is, if you play with sharpening a little bit, and then the masking at the bottom, what does the masking do at the bottom of those four?
The masking, the masking tool will take the sharpening bit and mask only in certain places. Generally, the noisiest, the places where it's been affected. If you see closely in here, some things are going to be dropped out of that filter. And I honestly don't tend to use sharpening in Lightroom all that often. If I really want to sharpen, I go to a tool from the Nik Tools collection, and I use that because it's a lot more control. There's a tool called Nik Tools that's called what's it called?
FX Pro?
No. Yeah, there's FX Pro. Silver FX Pro is really good at sharpening, and so is Color FX Pro. There's sharpening tools in there that are much better in Lightroom.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So I'm going to go through quickly about some compositing. So this is over the COVID, I've been bored. So with COVID being so bored, I got myself a light trigger and this trigger called a MyOps trigger. And the MyOps trigger actually responds to, it fires your flash or your camera by different signals. In this case, it happened to be sound. So when I pop the balloon with that needle, this is a pole that's got a needle attached to it. When the needle touched the balloon, the sound of the pop fired off the flash, which in turn which got the camera. And as a result, I was able to get the water exploding. Now, that's really neat, but it wasn't enough for me. So I put them together to make a more interesting image. And you'll notice I cleaned it up a good bit as well. And I superimposed the splash over the balloon. So you get a sense as to before and after in the same image. And there's been a lot of Photoshop work done on this to clean it up because if you look at the original, there's a lot of distracting pieces. So you'll see that little bit of red, you see that whole thing's been taken out. This little blemish from the flash is gone. This piece of the string is taken out, right? And then it all goes together into a final image. And again, in this case, I did put the black border on for competition, but I wanted to really continue the thinking around the splash. So I had the splash go outside the stroke line. So this image is kind of interesting because this was a shot I did in a local Audubon Society near home. But I want to show you the power of changing backgrounds because I'll show you the original. That's the original. And I would posit that that's an interesting shot, but it's such a flat image. And if I want to compete with this, and I'm debating if I'm ever going to, I decided that it needed something else in the image, and it needed some more darks. And I added a background sky. And you were asked about noise reduction. So this one's a good candidate for noise reduction. See all that noise? It's all kind of overly sharpened. If I wanted to go in here and I could go into the sharpening tool and the noise reduction, I could bump that a little bit and smooth out some of that noise in the clouds. And now it's much better. And it didn't really hurt the bird too much. I could bring some of the detail back. So you get the idea. So let me go back to what I put together for us. By the way, if any of you, I don't know if NeoWise was visible in India, but NeoWise was definitely visible here. And I spent most of the month of July in a very sleepless state, getting up super early, getting pictures of the comet, which was just spectacular, just spectacular.
Well, here in India, it was raining around that time.
Was it? That's a shame, because it was, in my lifetime, I've never seen a comet with the naked eye, and you could see this with the naked eye. It was just unbelievable.
So Steve, the comet picture, is that a stacked picture or it's a single exposure?
This one is a single exposure.
Wow.
I have some stacked images of the comet, and I have an Astro catalog, which is separate from this catalog, because the Astro work's pretty complicated, and it needs a lot more stuff. But yeah.
Steve, what's the EXIF information on this one? I was just trying to see on the side panel if.
It looks like it got lost from Photoshop. Let me go to the originals directory here, and let's see here. I don't know why it's in this directory. Better that I show that to you later in the
Sure.
In the other catalog.
Why I'm impressed is because even the plasma tail can be seen in that single exposure, and the dust tail is normally you can get in a single exposure, but even the plasma tail can be seen. Yeah.
Well, I got plenty of shots with single exposures of the trail. It's this blue trail that's hard to get with a single exposure. But
that's the plasma tail, right? Which is so difficult to get. The dust tail is not that difficult, but in single exposure, getting that plasma tail is fantastic.
Well, maybe I'm wrong. It might not be a single. I will go. I think it's single, but we can go back and look in a few minutes. I'll finish going through these images. This is one I just showed in competition this past week. This is called On Approach. I've gotten into, when it rains, I do macro. So I caught this, Katie did, and I put him in the refrigerator for a little while so he slowed down. I don't kill the bugs, I keep them alive. And I put his antennae out of the frame intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like he's coming right at you. I don't think I'm going to ever compete with this one. I don't think it's quite sharp enough, believe it or not. It just looks a little, it's just, and the storytelling with it is not quite there. But I have competed with this one and did pretty well with it. This was a shot in New York City on 9/11. Every year they have what they call the Tribute in Light, and they put the high beam lamps up to remember those who died in the Twin Tower attacks. And I went on top of the Manhattan Bridge and got this sort of long exposure. I happen to like this. This didn't do as well in competitions as I had hoped, but I personally like this image a great deal.
So is this from the Queens side, or I mean?
No, this is the Manhattan side. That's the FDR Drive and the Brooklyn Bridge.
Okay. Okay.
This is one of my Astro shots, which I actually just competed with this past week. We had an assigned subject called Eyes, and in a daring move, I put in something that was a picture of that's known as the Eye of God Nebula. Unfortunately, the judges didn't think it met the criterion as well for the topic, and it didn't do all that well in competition, but it's one of my best Astro shots. There's details in this that are actually, this is the compilation of 4 nights of shooting of about 1 to 3 hours each. And you may or not be able to see it through Zoom, but there's some detail out here of reds in this planetary nebula. It's also known as the Helix Nebula. It's only visible for about 2 months a year in the southern sky, right about autumn. So it's fading right now. It's in Aquarius, and it's gorgeous. I'm sorry the judges didn't enjoy it as much as I did, but I felt like being daring this week.
So Steve, so this one, so you had all the light frames, the dark frames, the flat frames, everything, the bias frames, and how long was the exposure, and how did you stack, and then how did you process it? Could you just spend a couple of minutes?
I'm going to actually ask the rest of the group if they want me to do that, because I could dive very, very deep into Astro, but there's only about 15 minutes left. I could go there, but please tell me if the rest of the group wants me to.
Let's see, this is a good example where I see the histogram and it's all the way to the left.
Yeah, but that's intentional. Astro shots that rule doesn't apply in an Astro shot.
Okay.
It doesn't. It can't. I mean, it's all the way to the left because it's all dark field here.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
So Kiran, can we do one thing? Can we have you and Steve on a Astro night separately together?
Yeah, I can do an Astro talk separately. Absolutely. Yeah, sure.
And Kiran, you should also get ready for the same day so that both of you can share your thoughts.
Sure.
Okay.
So
Steve, the guy who was Astro expert here is Kiran. And I think he is also as passionate as you and has, I think, all the tools and techniques. And it'll be wonderful to have both of you kind of, do a session.
Okay. So I'll just do a few more and I'll show you. These are some of my better. So this shot, we had an assigned subject recently called Hallway Light. And I was racking my brain literally for months trying to think about what to shoot for Hallway Light. And I don't know if Rosemary is still on the call.
She just left.
Yeah.
She just left.
Oh, okay. Well, this was a hard topic for me. I didn't know what to do. And I finally said, I'm going to just shoot my cat. And I set this up and my wife is literally holding the cat still behind the door out of frame. And this is the original shot, by the way. That's the original. And the problem with this shot this way is that it if you read left to right like we do in English and many countries, this is not the way to show this image. The way to show this image is actually like this, because this line here leads you into the bright part, and then the doorway stops your eye from leaving the frame. Now, my wife actually finds this shot much better. And Sandeep, you can't say why you know this, but why do you think my wife likes this image better?
She's a left-hander.
She's not, no, she's not left-handed.
Okay.
But she does read right to left.
Oh.
So my wife is Israeli. And in Hebrew, you read right to left, not left to right. So it turns out, depending on your audience, you may need to mirror your images depending on where you're showing them. So if I were to show this image in Israel, I would have to show it like this, like this. But if I show it in America, I got to show it like this.
Yeah, I think in the Middle East also they would appreciate it. I think Manjunath left.
Yeah, Arabic reads the same way as Hebrew, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
So a couple more.
So if your wife is holding the cat, how come we don't see her shadow in there?
Because I'm really good. Well, the reason you don't see it, and it's not because I'm really good, but I just couldn't resist the claim, is because she's behind the wall over here. There's another. This doorway, actually, there's a wall onto the left here. This is the way it was shot. She's behind the wall, and the lighting from here is coming from above.
Okay.
There's a lamp above her head. So again, I wanted to show you a couple of Photoshop cleanups I've done.
Wow.
So this is a
Okay.
hawk, a red-tailed hawk that was in my yard a couple of weeks ago. And this is a nice shot, but there's a bunch of distractions, like this branch is out of focus and it's in front of the hawk. And that's the cleaned up version of it.
Oh, wow.
And you'll notice there's a big change in the background with the reds. I discovered there's a filter in the Nick collection from DxO called Indian Summer, which actually changes greens into reds and oranges, and it makes it look like autumn. And it did an awesome job with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are filters allowed? I mean, filters, as you see, obviously in Instagrams and all that, are those allowed for competition?
Yes, for competition, yes, but not for nature competition. So this probably couldn't have been used in a nature category. If you wanted to cheat, I suppose you could have it shown, but ideally you shouldn't do that. That I would have to.
Yeah. No, sorry. You did it. I was just going to say, could you please toggle between the two? I just wanted to compare the two. So. Oh, nice. Yeah. Wow. It's beautiful.
So I've done some work here, as you can see, to get rid of this.
Yeah.
That whole branch is gone. Like I took it all out. I probably should take this branch out too.
So you've done some stamping on the Photoshop?
Yeah, actually, I think I used this new technique they have called content aware.
Content aware fill? Yeah.
Yeah. Might have been, I don't remember if I clone stamped it or I used content aware fill. I remember I was saying I went to this air show, or not air show, just at the runway. So this is, the reason why that's red is I was doing some experimental masking with this new tool, and the experimental masking really did a beautiful job here. Like I put a red thing under it to see if there was anything I missed. And, oops, sorry. It did a really good job. You could maybe clean some of that up a little more, but it did generally speaking, did a great job. And it allowed me to create this image, which I'm going to compete with this week, which I'm calling Lunar Landing.
How do you come up with these captions?
That's something in its own right. And you have to come up with them because it turns out the name of these images matters in competition. It matters a lot, actually. This is, I think I showed earlier, this is the highest scoring image I've ever made. That got a competition, that got second place in the state of New Hampshire. It got first place in a few other places, and it got a loan collection at the Professional Photographers of America. That's called The Wind Beneath My Wings.
That's great.
This one actually has been in competition, but it's not quite sharp enough. This is called Call to Prayer.
What is it called?
Call to Prayer.
Call to Prayer, okay. Yeah, this is the wall, right?
That's the Western Wall, yeah. So this is a sample of how you can really use masking and blurring the background up to really enhance your image. I may compete with this one, I'm not sure yet, but I didn't like how there was so much noise. This was distracting to me, so I separated the basket, the bird's nest from the background, and I blurred the background a lot more. I think it needs more work though in terms of the mask. There's a couple of errors in the mask.
Also,
is there a blurring capability in Lightroom?
No, this was done in Photoshop.
Okay, okay.
And it was done with a filter from Topaz Labs called Mask AI Mask or Mask AI.
Yeah.
Getting the filter around the edges here is a real trick. And as you see, it didn't do it right. I can go back and fix this now that I see it. But some areas here, the masking isn't perfect, and it would take me some more time to fix that mask. And let's see what else we have here. And then here's another example of before and after. So here is a picture of an eagle from South Africa on a safari. And notice a couple of things about this. So first of all this crap around his head is gone.
Yeah.
And I went to great pains to clean that up. Also, I zoomed in a little bit, and if we go into this individually, I enhanced the color. And this is all because it was raw, by the way. I didn't add color. The color's there. It's a matter of bringing it out. And I darkened the whites because the white was blown out. If you look at the original image, because it's raw, there's actually data in here. And the data can be seen if you go into this fixed version a little cleaner. So it's actually visible. This won't be a competitive shot, but it is one that's this dung beetle. This is the before and the after of the dung beetle.
So enhancing the color, was that through the hue saturation HSL?
Actually, yeah, that was actually. So we can go into that one if you want to look at it. Oh, I take it back. I didn't use hue saturation on this one. This is just adjusted with the presence and the tones. I brought the highlights all the way down. I mean, I could redo it together while we're here. I could just hit reset. That's the original. And I know that the highlights are just too much. I know that I want to bring the whites down a little bit. I want to recover some of the shadows. And I need to bring back some of the texture that's been lost. And I'm going to pump the vibrance. That's about all you need, but I could go further down in hue saturation. I could drop the luminosity of some of these oranges, darken it a little bit, just the oranges. See, it doesn't change the bug.
Yeah.
Because the bug is an orange.
Nice.
This is cool.
Yeah.
This is really cool. And now, I mean, this whole lecture, Steve, you asked me to, you said that if you are shooting JPEG, log out of this classroom.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah, you can't do any of this if you do it in.
Exactly. So I you know, I used to have Lightroom long back, but I mean, time is a big constraint, right? So at the end of the day, I said, when I get time, I'll think about shooting RAW again. But now
No. Stop.
Now I'm compelled that I must only do RAW and then start getting Lightroom on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Stephen, we had a question amongst ourselves earlier today. Is there an alternative to Lightroom?
There was. Apple used to make something called Aperture,
Right.
and Aperture ended. They killed it.
Oh,
I think there are a couple of alternatives to Lightroom, but I got to tell you, why would you want them?
Okay.
There's plenty here.
Enough said, right? Okay.
Yeah. And there was one more thing that was being discussed today in the group about Lightroom Classic versus Lightroom Desktop.
Oh, that's an important feature. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, very important here.
Yeah. Ignore Lightroom. Only use Lightroom Classic. Lightroom, the new version, is like new Coke. It sucks. It just sucks. Don't go there.
So LRC is what we should be using.
Yes, don't use Lightroom itself.
Okay.
LRC, Lightroom Classic.
Yep.
The one they're trying to drive everything into the Adobe Cloud, and it's like a watered down version, and there's so much you can't do with it.
Yeah.
I would say actually sort of add a caveat to that. So if you have a lot of photos and you want to do something quickly, the Lightroom, the sort of cloud version, their naming is kind of really weird. The LR, you can use it fast, and then you can clone that same sort of adjustments in a bunch of photos in one shot. That's helpful, and that could be faster because that's a little dumbed down and simplified. So if both are available, I might even think about like doing like a sort of vanilla work with Lightroom cloud version because that's simplified, and then use Classic for things that are really for good images and something that you.
I got to tell you, Sandeep, I disagree. Don't even bother with the Lightroom itself, the new one. I say that because they're trying to bring the two apps together, but the differential in terms of what you can do in the Classic versus the other, at the moment, for now, it's just dramatically different. It's not worth your energy.
Yeah,
it just isn't.
Yeah, and Sandeep, why can't you do multiple selections in LRC anyways?
No, LRC you can do more. My point was if somebody is a more casual kind of user of Lightroom, and you don't want to submit to competitions and all, then I think I just happened to land onto using that new Lightroom for some time before going back to Lightroom Classic. And then only realized the difference. Actually, I updated and I just suddenly got to the new version. And I used it. So it is simplified and does a lot of, simpler things. And then you can clone that or sync between, probably hundreds of photos if there are similar changes. So what I realized is that one does like a little bit simpler and less complicated. So somebody's learning for the first time and they are happy with what they need to do. I think that could be done. But the kind of sophistication that you need for certain pictures, maybe it's for birds or whatever, just for your own collection, you would probably need Lightroom Classic.
Yeah.
I guess that's true. I mean, it becomes kind of like Mac versus PC or Beta versus VHS. It becomes more of a religious question than a other question.
Steve, just a question on this frog. What was the lens that was used?
This was shot on an Olympus OMD EM1 Mark II, I think. I can check it for sure, though. The EXIF data will tell me. Yep, Olympus 60 millimeter f2.8, and the camera was. Where's the camera? Oh, EM1X.
Okay.
And this was this is a focus stack image, and it's been, that was done the focus stacking was done in camera. The Olympus camera can actually do focus stacking in the camera.
Oh.
Which is really clever. That's a talk for another day.
Yeah. So the DNG file, is that a raw file in Nikon or?
No, DNG is an Adobe standard that they put out for the world. It basically stops so in 20 years, my catalog hopefully will still be usable if Nikon changes or Olympus changes or Olympus goes away.
Yeah.
But in order for that to happen, if that does happen, I don't want to lose all my work. I should convert to DNG, which is a standard that will be around forever probably.
Because Canon has CR2, and that's what I imported as.
Ideally, you should change over from CR2, and Lightroom can do. We haven't even talked about the batch capabilities of Lightroom. Maybe we should take a few more minutes to do that because it's important. It's an important feature.
And while you find that out, the DNGs take huge amount of space. If CR2 is your 25 megabyte or 30 megabytes, the DNG will be over 100 megabytes. For the same
wow!
Not necessarily. If you don't,
I've had like really sort of bad experience. It filled out my disk space in no time and realized why everything was crashing. So you can just compare. Actually, you have something between the same image.
There's a trick, actually, Sandeep. There's two or more ways of actually making a DNG, and the reason why your files are probably getting really large is so. Let's say here. This was a focus stacked image. This is not, let me find one that's a plain old, all these are edited. Let me just go to a raw file somewhere. Hold on.
Oh, that's funny. Your hummingbird image. I almost have an identical image of that.
Incidentally, somebody asked about the moon being blown out. Here's
Yep.
a good version of the moon being blown out.
Yep. Yep.
And if I darken that up a bit, the detail is there. You see it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all in there.
Wow.
That's the dynamic range that RAW gives you, by the way.
Yeah, I learned that now.
And I could actually, I could go a little longer. I'm actually still fine to go if you guys want to keep talking. It is a Saturday and it's raining like crazy here. I got nothing better to do today. I want to show you how I might take this one and edit it up to get a nice exposure out of it.
I'm game. My wife is out. I'm by myself. No problem at all.
I'm
How
game.
about anybody else?
I'm game. I think Tarun and Ajay, they might be getting tired.
Well, it's late. I
This
mean,
is very interesting, actually.
Okay.
I think if you continue, since it is recorded and a lot of people are hoping to catch up with the recording, it might be helpful. And Steve, appreciate your generosity of time.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right, let's give this a shot and see if we can make something nice out of this image, because this is one I wanted to make anyway. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm not going to touch this in Lightroom. I'm going to go right into Photoshop. And I'm going to switch over to Photoshop. I hope that did it right. You seeing Photoshop?
Yep.
All right. I'm going to make a duplicate copy. We're going to make many copies of this one. Okay. And I'm going to go into some advanced topics called luminosity masking in just a minute. So I'm going to make several copies of this one. 3 at least. We're going to make this one, we're going to call this one base. And this one we're going to turn off altogether for original. We're going to call this one +1, +2. Okay, now what we're going to do is the base image we're going to leave alone. I need a -1 too, actually. I need a couple negatives. -1. Oops. -2. Okay. Why did I name them minus and plus? Because what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into Adobe Camera Raw and I'm going to just very specifically change the exposure -2. Actually, this one needs -3. And this needs more work than that. Okay, that's one version. And you won't see it because these are above it and all these different layers are in line. So I'm going to take this one and go to -1. And get this one, make +1. That's the base. Sorry, that's the wrong one.
Yeah,
I want the base to leave it alone. Oops, not temperature.
+1.
Sorry, exposure. And then this was going to be +2. Okay. Now, I'm not going to tell you this is going to definitely work, but I'm going to try it. So I have a tool that I've purchased called Lumenzia. And what Lumenzia does is you see it popped out here?
Mm-hmm.
Lumenzia works with what's called luminosity masking. And what it's going to let me do is selectively pick the brightest or the darkest objects in the image and create masks around them. And then we're going to blend them all back together. This technique is called auto blending, or it's same image blending. So I'm going to select, oops, no, not select there, sorry. There's a pre-blend, which actually creates masks, and add black masks and put the darkest in the top. Where did my layers go? Oh. What? Oh, focus was wrong. Let's drop that out. Somehow I guess it focused on the wrong image. Sorry, I got to pull that off the line there. Something is wrong. It's not doing what I'm wanting it to do. All right, we'll do it by hand. We're going to add black masks on this. Okay, this is the base image, and this is the moon that I want to use later. And I've got all these different versions, and I've got black masks on them. And what I want to do is let certain parts of these images come through. And what I want here is I want everything except the moon to show through. So the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the darks and allow the darks to show through, and add that to the mask, and I'm going to paint it back in. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in Lumenzia for this layer. I'm going to select the darks, all the darks. And now what happens is that the dark is showing a pre-blend. And what's going on is that anything that's white is going to show through. Anything that's dark is not going to show through. But I want this to get more aggressive than that. And I really want the moon to be masked out. So I'm changing the luminosity masking. And now what's happening is that the moon is now totally masked out, because I don't want that to show through, but I want everything else to show. I'm going to hit select. And now watch this trick. You're going to think this is great. I'm going to paint with white. Oops. Well, I can fix this by painting with black. And I got to turn the masking off. Now, if I paint with black, in here, now the problem with this image is, see the rim around the moon? Mm-hmm. This is a problem with moonshots like this, because when you overexpose for things, the image can get really funky, and the masking can get screwed up. So the moon at the right exposure looks like that because there's bleeding in this image. It actually causes the bleeding to come through. And I may not be able to pull this off. We'll see. This may be harder than I thought, but because what I need to do is mask away this bleed, and the bleed is probably too much to deal with. I may have bit off more than I can chew on this one. We'll see. So let's turn that off again. We'll do another luminosity mask and we'll pick up the whites and see what happens. All right, that's not bad. What I'm trying to do is pick up the detail here. And then what I need to do is then paint with the different color into this mask or into another mask to let it show through and get rid of this edge. See, it's not going to work. I bit off more than I can chew on this one. Sorry, guys.
No issues.
But that's kind of the idea. You basically make multiple versions of the same image and you bring out the pieces that you want and you get rid of what you don't want. And then you blend it all together.
That's awesome.
Even this looks good.
No, it doesn't look good at all.
But now I see a lot of your images where I think you have done similar thing in Photoshop. Like I saw a Statue of Liberty there, one picture. Actually, which had...
Yeah, let's go back there. I'll show you the Statue of Liberty. There's a couple of that's interesting. I didn't save it. Oh, actually, that's one I had worked on previously that isn't too bad. There is a rim, but it's not terrible. Anyway, with regard to the Statue of Liberty shot, some of this stuff I don't do that to, some of it I do. So this shot here, you mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That wasn't doctored so much.
Oh, okay.
That was not. But I'll show you the one that's been an award winner. That's not the award winner. That's the award winner.
Oh, wow.
And some of that was done on this one. So the originals for this one. So people think this was photoshopped and I dropped the moon in. So you guys can see, I didn't drop the moon in. I shot that moon hundreds and hundreds of times at different exposures. And then what I did to drive in the moon in that final image was I did use that technique where I didn't go 5 stops. I did 1 or 2 stops so I could actually get the detail back that I wanted. So you see there's more detail in there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how I did that shot's called Show Me, She Lights the Way.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
But I
see the dynamic range is really.
Do you want to mention the tools that you use to position yourself and with respect to?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So to do this shot required me to use something use a planning tool. And the planning tool I used was called the photographer's ephemeris. I'm going to the website. I'm going to share my what do you call it? Share Chrome in a second here. So this tool is spectacular. Somebody had way too much time on their hands, and they've looked up in an almanac or something, the positions of the moonrise and the sunrise by angles, and then overlaid it into Google Maps. And it's an essential tool to shoot things like that. So the shot of the airplane over the moon for a lunar landing, believe it or not, I probably could have set that up if I had the patience. But the Statue of Liberty is a little easier to do because it doesn't go anywhere and it's not in motion. And here's the photographer's ephemeris. This is the desktop app.
You have on create account, sign in.
I have an account.
No, but you were on create account.
Yeah, there we go. So what you do is you put in I'm going to put in Liberty State Park. And we're going to zoom in. And these pins, so the Statue of Liberty is here. This is the angle of the moonrise tonight. And the problem is that this time of year, the angle's way off. But if I were to move this up to, let's say, July of 2021, and we go to the right day. Okay, this is probably close to full moon. And here's how it works. Do you see this light blue line? That's the moonrise line. And if I take the time of this and I cross the moonrise, which in this case is, this is not a full moon. Let's get to the full moon. Now we're going to moon phases.
Where do you see the full moon? Oh, I see, waxing 100% waning.
Full moon right there.
Yep.
Now,
okay.
At 8 o'clock or 8:15, 8:34, that's the angle of the moon. If I stand a little further on this, that's a boardwalk there. I happen to know that, I've been there. If I stand right there, 46 minutes after moonrise, I happen to know that from experience, the moon will be over Miss Liberty's torch, and you can see it perfectly from there.
Oh, wow.
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 Steve, you just gave me something that I've been looking for the longest time, because I wanted to take a moonrise shot over the water in Annapolis, Maryland. And now I know where to pin it. Wow.
So there's an iPhone app, and there's a, I don't know why it keeps logging me out. Any of you guys ever find lately that Catalina logs you out without expecting it?
I have not updated to Catalina, so.
It's both a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's other tools that do this too. There's one called PhotoPills, and it has the same kind of planning thing. And actually, PhotoPills does a little more. It can plan Milky Way rise. It can plan moonrises and a bunch of other stuff. That's a great app. I would highly recommend it. I would recommend this one too. And this lets you line things up. So the shot that I showed you before of the moon over the lighthouse, remember I showed that image? Mm-hmm. That was set up with this app. And if you want to do stuff like this, it's almost if essential. You really can't just by chance get that shot. It's just too hard.
For the Statue of Liberty shot, how did you get the height? What did you have to do for that?
So on the Statue of Liberty, the angle of the height, I mean, you got to break out your old college trig, but because of where it was in Liberty State Park, there's a boardwalk that gives you some latitude to walk side to side or up and down, and you have to sort of track where it's going, and you need to move in the middle of the shoot if you don't plan properly. So you have to just you have to slide side to side. And by the way, a yard or two to the right or left, or a meter or two to the right or left, can completely screw you up, and you will miss it. You got to be in exactly the right place to get that shot. And by the way, on a full moon night, where it's in that position, there's like 50 photographers there trying to do the same thing. So we get there 2 hours ahead of time to sort of block out our spot.
Mm.
And the other thing you need to do if you shoot things like this is you need to shoot shoot bracketed too. So the first time I did the Liberty shoot, the moon was blown out and I got no detail in the moon. And if I go back to my catalog, I can show you what I did. So I shot that thing 3 different times, twice in 2018 and once in 2019. So this was my very first shot of Miss Liberty. And there's hundreds of shots here. This is the time lapse. I get really pissed off when people tell me, oh, you photoshopped that. Yeah, no, I didn't. I spent a crap load of time going to the right place at the right time to get exactly the right shot. This was not, this was all done. Where is the moon? Oh, these are time lapses. There it is. So this is all part of a time lapse. So if I actually have this all created into a fully working time lapse.
Mm. Mm.
But this particular time lapse wasn't lined up properly enough. So I missed it.
Mm.
But this one I think is the one where I caught it. Yeah. I caught it here. But I didn't do bracketing on this shoot, which was the first thing I did, first try. I didn't know what I was doing. So what you need to do is when it gets to the position you want it in, there's 3 positions that really work well. One of them is the book, one is the crown, and one is the torch. And when you get to the torch, and I didn't do this on the first shoot, what I should have done, and the focus looks a little soft on this, I should have shot this bracketed and shoot 3 to 5 shots at a time very, very quickly so I had enough data to bring it in properly. This was all one set of exposures. And as you'll see, they didn't really cut it. That was the torch shot.
So what was your focus point here, Steve?
I had to focus on her.
Okay.
I'm about about 3/4 of a mile away. Mm-hmm. By the way, when I got to do it the last time, no. So this is the last time. This is the one that was the award-winning shoot. when it came time to get up to the right spot, I started shooting brackets. So here's bracketing. Dark, here. These are the brackets.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got the money shot, I did it again.
And you bracketed 1/3 or halves or fulls?
Full stops.
Full stops. Okay.
I think maybe 3 stops worth. We could even check that here. We can look. We went here. This was shot at 1/5 of a second for f/16. This was 1/5 of a second at f/8, 6/7. And then that's it. That's it. The triple bracket. These 3. And by the way, there's a lot of data in these 3 frames. I think this is the actual frame that was the money shot. Maybe it was the next set. I think it's the next set. Because I had the moon even at the base of the yeah, this is the money shot. Notice that the angle here was almost perfect. Yeah, this is the one. This is the one I used. These 4 frames or 3 frames.
Wow.
So I hate it when someone says, "Oh, you photoshopped that." Well, no, I didn't. I worked my ass off to get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, guys, it's 2.5 hours in here. I think we've done our bit for God and country. Or 2 hours. Yeah, 2.5 hours in.
Yeah, I think
2.5 hours. Yep.
amazing lecture, amazing session.
Yes, Stephen, this was invaluable. Thank you so much.
Really invaluable.
Well, check out my website if anybody likes what I have. They make wonderful Christmas gifts.
Awesome. Awesome.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We've learned a lot.
My pleasure.
And Sandeep, thank you for introducing Stephen to us.
Yes.
If you want to do a shot, you know what? Let me give you one tease. Hold on a second. One tease. All right, let's share this real quick. I'll just go a quick run through of these. So you can come back for some more. You guys seeing it?
Yes.
That one's gettable now.
What kind of equipment do you use for these?
This is with a 92mm telescope that has a guide scope, and it's hooked to a computer guiding system through my Mac. And then it's all hooked up to a German equatorial mount that moves the camera and the whole rig very slowly across. This is what the rig looks like right here. There's an Astro camera on the back. There's a guide camera here. This is a guide scope, the main telescope. And this is the German equatorial mount. And this moves the whole rig, you know, when it's polar aligned across the sky at the same pace that the Earth is rotating. And then I could do stacks with dozens, if not hundreds of images.
Wow.
So this was a shot I did called Searching for Van Gogh. Oh, we didn't even get to the comet, but that's the comet.
Yeah.
Here's another one of the comet.
Wow, this is fantastic. This is
That's
fantastic.
Trifid Nebula, one of my favorites.
Mhm.
When it dissolves. Come on. I think there's a lot of resource. Oh, the file can't be found. That's not good. There we go. That's the Trifid. This is the coat hanger.
Ah,
Andromeda, this is called the Cygnus Wall, part of the North American Nebula.
we're sitting in a planetarium.
Sorry?
It feels like we're sitting in a planetarium and looking at the sky.
There's the Bubble Nebula. This is the jellyfish.
Mm.
This is the California. And this is the Heart and Soul.
Wow.
Another version, just the heart. And I'm going to use this in competition one day and call it Somebody Up There Loves Me.
Oh, look at that. Look at that.
All right, gentlemen. I hope you found this helpful. We can talk about Astro another day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we should. Thanks a lot, Steve. And
Thank you, Steve.
your time taking us through the journey here.
It's been a journey. This has taken me years to get to this level.
Yeah,
Uh,
we can see that.
But by the way, these Astro shots have not been, it's years, but not that many years. I've only done Astro now for, I want to say, I've only done Astro now since about 2017,
Wow. Okay.
2018. So
Yeah.
this is my first shot of Andromeda.
But, you know, I'm just amazed, being a physician, you are able to find all the time.
I don't practice anymore. That's part of it.
Okay.
I was going to ask you, what do you do in your spare time?
Yeah, so I'm the chief data officer at the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation.
Oh,
And in my
okay.
spare time, I've been building a medical registry for myeloma data and it helps bring vast amounts of data together for patients and for researchers. And before that, I worked in life science companies, and I actually spent some time with Sandeep working at Skyscape. And 25 or whatever years ago, we actually started a version of Skyscape together back when I was still at Harvard.
Okay.
That's the Skyscape 1.0.
So Skyscape is where you and Sandeep have been together. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he said that at the beginning of the talk.
Well, I didn't catch the Skyscape part. I knew Sandeep and Skyscape. I mean, Sandeep and I were from the same class, so I know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Nice.
Anyway,
Thank you, Steve.
my pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.